Hello and welcome to Talking Reds, a still fairly new Nottingham Forest podcast, hosted by myself, Greg Oram. How you doing, mate?
I'm doing great. I look forward to that every morning. I'm just totally shocked each time when you throw those out there. So thank you. Morning,
No,
guys.
you're very welcome. If you're finding us for the first time, then welcome to the channel. If you've been here before, then of course welcome back. Coming up on today's episode, we will be catching up on the latest Forest transfer rumours, chat about the season ahead for the first team, and there'll be an update on the women's team as well, looking at some potential striker targets with Richard, and of course there'll be the lightning round too. Joining us today, we are thrilled to welcome a young man with a growing reputation in the world of sports journalism. He's already got a few gigs, including commentator for Notts Hospital Radio, head Forest correspondent for the Nottingham Sport newspaper, and indeed a new role just announced last week for goalkeeper.com, where he will be writing and producing content all about, you've guessed it, goalkeepers. Please welcome to Talking Reds, it's Jamie Martin.
I like it. This is quite nice, actually. Thank you.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you with us, Jamie. Thank you so much for taking the time out to be with us. We're going to get kicked off straight away. We always start with finding a bit about our guest in that chair. So you're a Forest fan. You're a bit younger than myself and Richard. So getting your perspective on Forest from your point of view is going to be really interesting. But what is your story? What's your background when it comes to Nottingham Forest, Jamie?
Well, I grew up, pardon me, and I'd never really had a massive interest in football. You know, it was not something when I was probably about 4 or 5 that I really thought I'd ever enjoy. My dad persisted though, you know, and he'd take me to Forest games and I'd hate it. I'd leave at half time when I was, you know, maybe 6 or something. And over time I started to kind of enjoy it, you know, especially when my little brother was born and I saw that he was really getting into it. So about the age of, you know, 7 or 8, I really started to get into Forest again, and my dad would take me every now and then. And I wasn't necessarily a regular because my dad just didn't, I don't think he had a season ticket at the time. And he was more taking my little brother as he was growing up. So I kind of just went on the odd occasion and I really started to enjoy it, you know, and throughout my time kind of watching Forest, there was never really much to smile about other than the fact that it's the club you love. Going with my dad, you know, who I don't live with my dad. So that was kind of my quality time with him, which I didn't get to spend a lot of time with him necessarily at times. So for me, the football was kind of also a way of seeing him and seeing him sometimes happy at us scoring a goal and then usually conceding 2 more straight after. It was all part of the experience for me. So, you know, it's unfortunately when I was younger, it isn't somewhere that I got to go every time like a lot of fans do, or, you know, but I've managed to, obviously, in the end now, be in a fortunate position where I do get to go and watch them every week. And that kind of love that I had for Forest pre-COVID that maybe I didn't get to kind of show much because I couldn't go to many games was rekindled, you know, when I started doing the job that I do. So, yeah, it's amazing being a Forest fan. And I'm saying that from Premier League point of view now, but I would have said that to you back in, you know, when we had Chris Hughton or when we had Philippe Montagnier. Do you know what I mean? I just love Forest. And I think all the tough times that we've been through collectively, but obviously throughout my life, I've never seen success until now. So it's all been worth it in the end.
Well, you talk about success, and success can show itself in different forms. When I was your age, we had always been in the first division, and I remember the European days and things like that. And Richard is quite similar to that. So having so long out of the Premier League, and for guys like you of your age bracket, guys and girls like you, within you're 18, right? So your view of Forest really was Championship football, and that glory to get into the Premier League must have felt like a distant dream. How did it feel? We spoke about this with Callum when he was on with us last time. How was it for you as a teenager supporting Forest, only ever experienced him in the Championship, and all that history that everyone talks about, the Brian Clough days, the European days, the trips to Wembley? How frustrating was it for you as a young Forest fan to hear about all the stories from maybe your dad and other family members and older Forest fans, and yet you as a Forest fan hadn't experienced anything like that? How frustrating was that?
It was almost like I want to be part of it. there's just, when you're a kid and there's things that you don't get invited to, like parties and stuff, and you always think, oh, I want to be part of that. Well, it felt like that because it always felt like there was a massive party in, when we won the 2 European Cups or when we won the League Cup, and people just remember it and just go, oh, what a great time that was. I remember, seeing the trophy get lifted and, watching Brian Clough do what he does every week. And I kind of think, God, I'd love to have been there. But then at the same time, I think it's beautiful that my dad and people before him in my family can kind of have that experience, because now I want us to forge a new era in our history where I can tell him, even though he's going through it with me, but I want to be able to tell him that this is my generation that are starting to kind of bring success to this club now, and tell my kids in the future that that Forest have had that success, and hopefully they will see it as well. And whether I'll see 2 back-to-back European Cups, I don't know if that will happen. I can only dream, really. But I wouldn't necessarily say it's frustrating. It's you just want to be part of it, which I suppose in a way is frustrating, but at the same time, it kind of, I don't know, it kind of motivates me to want to support the club even more and do anything we can as a kind of fan base, even though what we can do is only support them. It's limited in terms of the on the pitch sort of stuff that's going on. But it kind of makes me more motivated and more eager to see this Forest team succeed, because there's so much talent in this squad now. And when people say it's not possible that you could go on a European push, or it's not possible to do something, I always think, but stranger things have happened. Stranger things have happened. And for example, this Forest team doing something crazy this year, which I'm not saying they will, I don't think they will, but you've got to kind of have that belief and that hope, because your generation at one point, obviously you've seen a lot of success, but perhaps people before you didn't see that success or that hope. And look what happened there. 2 European Cups in the end and had years of success. So I'd love this to be kind of the second coming of Forest. That's what I'm really dreaming of as a young fan.
And I feel like maybe there is a little bit of something in that, because the miracle of getting out of the Championship is a very real thing. We were languishing, and when Forest came up with Clough and then won the league and won back-to-back European Cups, that will never be matched. But for Forest to get up out of the Championship out of nowhere with Cooper was in itself a complete miracle that's almost on a par in this day and age. So I feel like your generation and all of us share that moment, and that playoff final victory against Huddersfield. I mean, I was there. It was
best day,
one of the most best days ever. So hopefully there's lots more good times to come. Your own personal journey has taken you into the journalist world, and I mentioned at the top of the episode that you've got a few little gigs. You're a commentator for Notts Hospital Radio, as well as writing for Nottingham Sport, and now you've got the job with goalkeeper.com, and that in itself sounds really interesting. Just tell us a bit about all of that, please, Jamie.
Well, I mean, it all came about by chance. During COVID, I had a podcast. When I was 14, I decided that I was actually going to go into engineering. I was going to get an apprenticeship with Rolls-Royce and go into engineering from there. But it, in the end, just didn't really interest me. I like talking. I like sharing my opinion. I like doing research. And there's things that I'm definitely fixated on, and Forest is one of them. I started up a community news page in my local my town, and then I kind of went from there to being in a pub where I work full time still now. And someone mentioned to me, like, you like talking a lot, maybe you should come and do the hospital radio thing. And it never really kind of interested me. I thought, I'm not sure. And one time I got a text saying, be at Meadow Lane, obviously Notts County, on this day, come and do co-commentary for a football match. So I didn't know if it was a first team or not. I kind of turn up and it's a first team game. I'm there in a suit. Everyone else is there in jeans and a hoodie. And I'm thinking, God, I've made myself like an idiot here. But I kind of got on the co-commentary stuff at Notts, and I stayed there for 4 or 5 months, and Forest weren't doing too great, and that was the opportunity for me. They said Forest aren't doing too great. No one wants to go. Do you fancy going across the river and commentating? I said, absolutely. And my luck, obviously, Forest went up that year, and it was the best year. But it provided a platform for me. The Premier League provided a platform for me to grow, and to be able to obviously to thank the person who gave me the opportunity to join Hospital Radio first of all. Steve. You know, and then from there, the people at Nottingham Sport kind of gave me a chance to write about stuff, because as much as I like talking, I like to articulate what I think in words as well. And then obviously goalkeeper.com was one that came about, and I couldn't really say no. And it means that I can still do everything I'm doing now, but I can do that on top of it. And there's a lot of goalkeepers to talk about at Forest. So I'll never be short of content. So yeah, for me, it all came about by chance. I was really fortunate that the right people were there at the right time. And also, I'm just incredibly grateful for how welcoming the Forest community has been, because there's been times where necessarily a few people haven't been so welcoming, but 99% of people, such as yourselves, have just been wonderful, really welcomed me, and kind of given me a cushion and supported me to kind of get into this industry, because I will say it's bloody hard, you know. So when people might make a complaint about me or something I post, I just think it's a really hard industry to get into, you know, and I'm really putting in all the effort I can. And maybe people won't like what I do, and that's up to them. I respect their opinion, or you know, absolutely. But I just hope they respect the fact that this is tough, you know, and I'm not the only person trying to get into this, and that's what makes it more difficult. So I've fallen on good luck with Forest. And I feel for the likes of Colin Fray, who was commentating for so long, and he's an icon of my childhood, and I'm sure he's an icon for you guys as well. You know, hearing his voice is special. Yeah. But he waited, you know, 2 decades to see Forest back in the Premier League, and I just kind of fell on it. So, yeah, it's the most amazing thing to have been able to be part of, you know, and to have been given the opportunity to do it. It's amazing. So, yeah, I've loved every minute, and I can't wait for this season.
Richard and I have spoken on here about how important it is to give genuine support, because when you put yourself out there, there's always going to be people that are going to have something negative to say, and that's fine. I've certainly had comments fly in my direction, and that's absolutely fine. I can take it. But I guess when you're 15, 16, 17, 18, your kind of age, you know, it's not easy. So, you know, we've got your back, we've got your support. And anybody watching and listening, you know, just remember that words can sometimes have an impact. And, you know, you're doing really, really well. John Percy is linking up with you on X as well. And he's a really well-respected journalist. And Richard, you know, what are your thoughts on Jamie's career so far?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just sitting here stunned as I'm processing this, right? Because I'm thinking about myself in your position at your age and going, my goodness, I felt like I accomplished nothing at 18 years old. So, congratulations on such a remarkable ascension in your career and getting into an environment that you love. I mean, you're passionate about, which I think is fantastic. And I think the thoughts that were going through my mind was just, you know, there was a period of time in my you know, history with the club and my love for this team that I was over, and I've been most of my life in America. So there was a period in the 90s where, before the internet existed, where I'm not tapped into anything that's going on. So I'm just curious from your standpoint. You said you liked research from in your you know, the chosen vocation now. Are you going back frequently and really digesting some of that history and trying to understand where it's come from and how it's progressed? And then I think, you know, and understand, like Greg was alluding to, and you were talking about where it ended up before we got back in the Premier League. But I'm just curious, how much time do you spend going back and watching highlights and interviews and reading things about that to better understand the history of the team as someone at your age?
I mean, it's something I enjoy doing, you know, and actually it does make me a little bit upset sometimes, you know, because one of the interviews that I love but also hate watching the most is probably Brian Clough's last one, you know, at home, and it's just devastating, you know, and you could see in his face he wasn't very well. And that was the kind of, as well as understanding the great parts of our history, you know, before Brian Clough as well, the FA Cup, a bit before all of our time, you know, understanding the kind of the really sad part about our history, and the kind of the massive up, but then the huge down, you know, as we get relegated and we don't return for 20 odd years. And also having the privilege of speaking to some of the players that were part of that generation that, you know, that were relegated or tried to get promoted and it didn't work out. You know, it's heartbreaking for them. And it makes me, again, it motivates me even more to kind of want to embrace the passion and, you know, the history that we're creating now. Because I know there's, you know, a lot of talk about the ownership, and I know that not everybody necessarily supports the ownership, and I'm not asking anyone to give me a linear answer, yes or no, do you support the ownership or not? But the idea that they have of having a new history that embraces the old history and will forever carry that along with us, but while also trying to give the younger people and also us guys just as a whole something to cheer about now under this, in this new era, is something that I want nothing more. And there's always chat about who the next manager is or who the next player is, but I'm not bothered about any of that. I want whoever is at this club now to succeed. I'm not interested in let's get this manager in so he can do this. I want Nuno to win us a Champions League. Do you know what I mean? I don't care how long it takes. I would love it to be Nuno. I'd love Ryan Yates to captain us in a Europa League final. Do you know what I mean? Those kinds of things.
Yeah.
I want to embrace that. And so, to answer your question, I look back in history and I look back at interviews that are great, but also the really sad ones, because then it kind of, it gives me a reason to support this club even more. And to also, again, try and feel part of it, because I wasn't part of that. And I want to understand what my dad's talking about in the kitchen when he tells me how good Brian Clough was, or he tells me how straight talking he was. I want to understand it. So, it's as much as a research for professional reasons as it is just for personal, and just trying to have, a good conversation with someone. So important to understand your history, because you understand why we got the 2 stars and why it just means so much.
Yeah. My son Orlando is 7. I've mentioned him a few times. I'm going to say it again. He is a Forest fanatic, and 2 or 3 days ago we sat down and we watched I Believe in Miracles, and he actually sat and watched the whole thing. I thought he might, get a bit, but he was really into it, and he already understands about the stars. He understands about the European Cup days. He knows who Brian Clough is. He knows who Nigel Clough is. He knows about John Robertson. So he himself is wants to learn about that part of our history, but he's in the fortunate position, similar to you, that when he first kind of awoke to Forest, we're getting into the Premier League. So I'm thrilled for him, because he's experiencing the Premier League years at his age, and hopefully more to come. So the history should be something. I think what I'm trying to say is that we should never turn away from. We massively embrace it. I think Cooper did that really, really well when he was our manager. He embraced that history, brought the ex-players back into the fold, and I think the Marinakis ownership have done a good job of doing that as well. But you're right, Jamie. We want to we want to make new history. Want to make new stories, and the thought of us winning a trophy, such as a League Cup, or dare I say it, a Europa League conference or something like that. I mean, those kind of things would just be magnificent, and I really feel that our fan base deserves it. And I know that that's an easy thing to say, but we, as a fan base, as a whole, whatever age we are, we've been through a lot. People that go week in, week out, people that live in America, Canada, Australia, that don't get to go and only follow Colin Frey's voice because he is an icon, or things like that. We're all in it together. So hopefully we will see this season take us up the league into a better position than what we've experienced the last 2. On the football side of things, we've had a friendly this week. The latest one was against Millwall, and we got a 2-1 win. I think we've all seen that friendly. Richard, what did you think about the team's performance? What kind of things are you taking from pre-season and that Millwall friendly in particular at the moment for Forest?
Yeah, the 2 things that have stuck out to me mostly, there's isolated performances by players, like we've talked about Moreira. Obviously, the situation with Elliot Anderson seems like it's fine, but we'll see what happens from that. I would say it's just the way the team, is playing, and how tight they seem, and not in a bad way, in a relationship way, in a connective way, and then it also manifests itself on the field. There are moments where I go, okay, we seem like we're giving the ball away, we seem like we're being a little bit errant with our passes, but then I start to think, well, wait a minute. I love these one touch, quick sort of passes between, multiple areas of the pitch, and we're seeing everybody kind of get involved, and everybody seem to be, I used the word cohesive last time, and I can't think of another word to state it, but to help understand where my head's at here. But ultimately, I just feel like we're a lot more confident team, and that seems to manifest itself in terms of how we move the ball. And I love the fact that we're very intentional with our press. I mean, that's been so evident in 2 matches, right? I mean, we're really putting a lot of pressure on the opposing team to win that ball back, right? And to get more possession. And I understand these are teams that we're playing that are not, they're not in the Premier League. They're not going to be, what we see week in and week out. I know I keep bringing that up, but it's worth bringing up because we know that the competition level is going to rise. But I don't know. I don't know how to articulate it any differently than I feel like we're a lot more confident and capable team going into this season than we were in the first 2 years. And clearly that's just the process, right? Getting into that third year, understanding exactly who you are and what you're trying to do, having a vision, which Nuno clearly has at this point. I love the fact that there's so much versatility in terms of who we have on the pitch and where they can play. I love the fact that we have the capability tactically and formationally to switch things up, and we're not going to lose anything by doing that. And that gives us a lot of opportunity as we progress through the season, depending on who we're playing, to be able to make those changes. And I feel like we're building more depth, right? You can always have more depth in areas like the wingers, which I know Nuno has called out specifically, but just comprehensively, I just feel like we look a lot more fluid and together and capable of retaining the ball and pressing the ball, progressing the ball up the field, and then pressing the opposing team when we lose possession, which is exciting to see because that's very different than what we've seen in the first couple of years.
Yeah, I think last season's preseason for me was a bit of a shambles. I don't think we even scored a goal in preseason last time round. It felt very disjointed with a lot of players getting minutes that were never going to be in the first team. I know we've had this time round with Nuno some minutes for Dennis, for Bowler, for Worrell, for O'Brien, but again, only in small moments. But I feel like it's a lot more purposeful. It feels like a real drive and energy to the way they're playing. Everything you just said, I completely agree with Richard in terms of the press, in terms of just general enthusiasm, if I can say that word. And as I say, the impact on players like Moreira coming in, he looks, I mean, he's 18 years old. He's making an impact again against lesser opposition. A quick word for Millwall, who I thought were disgraceful in the way they went about that friendly on Tuesday night. You know, it literally is a pre-season exhibition, and they're flying in like it's the World Cup final. But you know, if you're a Millwall fan listening, then you know you support a team that wants to go out and break players' legs and injure them, and it's just disgraceful. I thought that Sangare again looked like he is really developing into the kind of player we hoped we were signing, but he's not the only one. Jamie, what did you think? I mean, players standing out for me include Danilo, Callum Hudson-Odoi. Who caught your eye?
Can't disagree with that. I think Dominguez is really good as well. You know, he's a very tenacious footballer, and I think the layoff to Chris Wood was quite impressive. You know, and I think from a whole, the players you mentioned were really, really good. I think Danilo has been a standout throughout pre-season anyway, which is something I like to see because I think the last pre-season, or at least earlier into the last season, he had a bit of an injury issue. And he kind of didn't really find proper form until the end of the season, which has kind of been a recurring thing since he's joined Forest. Obviously, he joined halfway through in the first one. But I think overall those players, Moreira has been really interesting to watch because he's not someone that had a lot of first-team football when he was in Germany with St. Pauli. So, you know, to kind of see him make that step up as kind of confidently as he has and as quickly as he has is really impressive. And Hudson-Odoi for me is just looking like a renewed character. He's looking even stronger than last season because he's playing with confidence. He's playing without that fear of being injured. And he's playing almost without pressure, which I like about Forest because although we're quite a demanding fan base and we do have our moments of being quite fickle, I'd say that the pressure is a lot less than a lot of other clubs in the Premier League, especially the likes of Chelsea. And this move for him was perfect, I think. And, you know, and I think a lot of people were worried that maybe when Cooper left, that relationship wouldn't be as good between, you know, Hudson-Odoi and the management. But Nuno's come in and he's shown that transition between him and Cooper, albeit that the distance between the fans and the manager seems a bit more because he's not necessarily the most talkative of coaches. The football has improved 100%. That's statistically backed. And I like Cooper, but the difference is we've got options now. We've got more. I feel like Nuno's a better tactician than Steve Cooper, with respect again, because I think Steve Cooper's a legend of this football club who I will always be forever grateful for. And by the way, hold absolutely no grit towards because he's joined Leicester, because there's no rivalry there for me. I wish him all the best. I hope he, you know, does well for himself. But I think this season, this pre-season, Nuno's trying out kind of what he had at Wolves. He really wants that kind of the ruthless Wolves team that he had in the Premier League to be replicated with Nottingham Forest. And the versatility we've got in this club, not just in the positions, but as you mentioned, it with the formations, is fantastic. You know, if we bring in a couple more wingers, another striker, potentially another defender, I still think there'll be another 3 or 4 signings. Where this team will finish, I don't know. I'd like to say mid-table and go from there, because what some people call mid-table mediocrity, I would say, is a massive, massive achievement for us. So that's where we should be aiming for, if not higher. But, you know, I'm really impressed, because I don't take necessarily a lot from what happens in pre-season, because you can have a good pre-season and be awful. You know, I've been to watch the last couple of pre-seasons out in the Netherlands and in Germany as well, when it was really, really bad, you know, and we stayed up. So hopefully this pre-season does go on to be how we play for the rest of the year, of course, at a higher level against higher level opponents. But I'm not going to take too much from it. But at the moment, I'm impressed. And I think the players that we've kind of spoke about there, and indeed the whole team really, have really impressed me. So I'm looking forward to a big season ahead.
I thought sorry, Richard, I was going to say, I thought last pre-season we were poor. And I thought, in fact, last season we were poor. I know that we stayed up, and albeit without the points deduction, it was by 10 points. But I thought we had a poor second season. I didn't enjoy last season at all. So if there's any link to the pre-season and the season itself, then hopefully the pre-season so far going quite well, and everything you just both of you touched on, and the team, how it's developing and where we should be aiming for and how we're going to get there. I really feel we're in such a strong position for that mid-table finish. Richard, sorry, I cut you off. What were you going to say?
No, you're fine. I think it's you kind of touched on this, and Jamie, you touched on it as well. But the thought that keeps coming to my mind, the word that seems to be ever present, is the concept of mentality, right? Because last season, what was frustrating at times, consistency was an issue, but there seemed to be a lack of urgency and intent, and we just didn't seem, maybe even at times, some complacency and some malaise there. And it was a difficult season. I mean, there was a lot we were up against a lot of things last season collectively. It was a kind of a perfect storm of challenges. But I just think that the one thing you can do is to have a mindset, and that mindset seems to be evident to me. It's 2 matches in, but in terms of how we carry that over, that's a thing that can carry over into a season, right? I mean, no matter who you're playing, no matter what's going on, if your mentality is there, in the sense of you feel that sense of urgency to be, you know, and they don't see me losing confidence. I know confidence in terms of moving the ball and attacking play, but also not losing confidence when the ball gets dispossessed, when they get dispossessed and they sort of just fold, right? They sort of kind of, you know, shrink backwards. You don't see that as much right now. And I'm just wondering, is that going to be something we see through the rest of the season? Is this mentality of I'm going to play aggressive, I'm going to play confident, I'm going to continue to you know, press the ball, I'm going to continue to try to be a different team holistically. I think that's something for me, and maybe I'm making a bit of a leap here from 2 matches, but I think that's something we can control, and hopefully we continue that, and that becomes sort of a pattern of play for us throughout the rest of the season. Because that's the case, that really goes against a lot of what we saw, certainly through somewhat of the Cooper era, but certainly through the most of last season.
Yeah, I think so. I want to just mention that the Elche friendly has been moved. It was originally going to be Saturday morning. It's now on Friday, the 26th of July. So at the time of us going out, that is tomorrow. It's a 7 p.m. kickoff on Friday, 26th of July. So Forest take on Spanish team Elche at the Pinatar Arena, where they've been playing the last 2 games. So if you get a chance to tune in to that, please do so. Move on. It's a bit of transfer news that's come out this morning. Apparent interest in Nico Williams. I always thought that there would be a couple of curveballs this transfer window, with other teams that have got an eye on players that we have no intention of selling. HITC Footballer are reporting that West Ham apparently want Nico Williams. There is also apparent interest in the player from Manchester United, by Leverkusen, AC Milan, and Newcastle United. The club don't want to sell the player. There's been no agitation from Nico Williams to make the move. But when things like this have come out suddenly, then you just never know where it might go. Jamie, any Anything in that, do you reckon? Could we see Nico out the door?
I mean, look, every recruitment department has a long list, a long short list, and naturally there'll be 5-10 players on that they would like as a target in that position. West Ham's interest, I would say, is probably very, obviously they've made the bid, so it's definitely very real.
Yeah.
Forest don't want to sell him, fair enough. He has just joined a new agent, Unique Sports Group, and he's been here 2 years now. I can imagine that there's probably, and I'm not saying I know this, but there's a kind of inference that maybe he's wanting a new contract, and that this is the new agent's way of kind of establishing himself in Nico Williams' career by getting him a contract. You know, Unique Sports Group is a team that works with a lot of players, and you know, especially Forest players as well. So of course they're going to be wanting to try and make their stamp on his career. You know, AC Milan, they've been cited as a potential destination. They've been looking at Jakub Kivior from Arsenal. You know, they're looking at various players from around the world. You've got Manchester United, who you mentioned as well. They're looking at Jeremy Frimpong by Leverkusen. They're another team that have been linked with Nico because they're going to lose Frimpong. Trippier's going to go to Saudi Arabia. You know, it's all kind of a big circular link. And in reality, the likelihood is that Nico Williams is, and I'm sure there's a good chance that he is on the shortlist for these teams, but I don't think he'll be the first choice, because I think even with respect to Nico Williams, I think last season was really good, but I don't know if it warrants a move to any of those clubs just yet. I think that he's played really well, but in reality, I do think he still needs time to develop with Forest before making that move. But at the moment, I'd probably say that the kind of noise around him is probably nothing more than the pushing for a new contract, which, by the way, I wouldn't be opposed to him getting. You know, I think that last season was brilliant. If he starts this season well, give him a new contract early on or by Christmas, I think that'd be a good move. But in all honesty, West Ham probably give you about 5 million with, you know, Antonio. I can almost guarantee that Antonio is probably included in that deal. And that's that. So, but honestly, I don't really read too much into it other than the bid's been rejected. So agents sort really trying to get a new contract.
I think let's going back to last season. He didn't start the season. He was actually on the sidelines, not getting a game under Cooper. He started to get some minutes towards the end of Cooper's tenure, and every time he came off the bench, he was making an impact. He was really standing out as a player that was giving his all for the club and for the team. And then he had the run when he was being selected, and Nuno used him, and he finished the second half of the season as arguably the player of the season, because he put in stellar performances and was winning player of the month awards month in, month out. So, you know, I think there's a chance, there's always a chance that players can get sold. I spoke to you guys before we came on that my hunch, and I know nothing, anyone listening or watching, I know nothing at all. I've got a hunch that there could be something for Danilo. I think he could be one that might go. If we do have to sell again, or if we are going to make a sale again, I think he's the kind of player that might attract attention, and the bid might be good enough. Like I said, I don't know. And that's not me saying that I want to sell Danilo. So before anyone starts coming for me with, you want to get rid of Danilo, that's not it at all. I'm just kind of looking at the squad and just looking at the areas and thinking where we might attract attention. And, you know, we might see people wanting to sign Morgan Gibbs-White and Murillo, but the money's too high. But Danilo might attract attention. Other teams, or rather, I beg your pardon, other players that are on Forest radar, it's been reported that Ramon Sosa is on the list for Forest. He's a Paraguayan 24-year-old winger. He's currently at Argentine Primera División club Talleres. He's caused quite a stir on social media. Nathan Joyce, the Brazilian correspondent, expert, now putting his thoughts into Forest directly on a lot of players, it seems. He's been on X and he said, and this is a quote from him, "What I will say is Forest are clear in what they want. Once again, they have identified a winger that can not only drive them up the pitch, but chip in with goals and assists, thrives in transitions, technically gifted, good in tight areas. He's been perhaps overlooked by many to be 24 years of age." He goes on to say that he was on my one-to-watch list at Copa America, and he stated that the move to Europe had to be this summer for Ramon Sosa. He looks capable of Europa League standard. He goes on to say as well, his reported 15 million release clause would be acceptable from where he sat. That's Nathan Joy's position. And he was saying that Talleres were playing against a team, and Ramon Sosa hadn't been included. So it looks like a move for this one could be on the horizon. I know nothing about these guys. These are players that come up on social media, and I'm latching on to the likes of what Nathan Joyce and others are saying. Richard, what do you think about this link?
Yeah, I think it fits right into the framework of what Nuno's already brought up, right? I know I've brought that up a couple of times in terms of he specifically spoke about the wings, because to your point about who potentially could go that are a bit of a surprise, there's still something somewhat up in the air regarding Anthony Elanga, potentially Callum Hudson-Odoi. I mean, it was reported early on, right after the season concluded, early in the offseason, that there were 3 teams that were looking at Callum, right? And he's certainly done nothing to dispel the fact that he's going to continue great form going into this next season, right? So are those 2 guys potentially guys that could be a surprise exit depending on the money, right? Because we got the Newcastle situation. Obviously, what they gave us for Vlachodimos was outrageous. So, how much is there in that in terms of potentially seeing Elanga go? And I think, Greg, you brought that up before. Could he potentially be something that happens later in this offseason leading up to the beginning of the season, regular season? So from my perspective and watching some highlights of him, looking at how he played in the Copa America, he's got incredible pace. He plays on the left-hand side. So we're talking about where Callum's played, where Anthony Elanga's played well at times in the past too when Callum was not healthy. So he fits that mold of what we're looking at in terms of his age. He certainly has the propensity, as you mentioned, to score goals, which we are never going to turn that down. And so is it possible that, someone like this comes in and it makes it a little bit less fearsome for us to, or fearful to have someone like Callum exit for good money, or someone like Anthony Elanga to exit for good money? But yeah, plenty of pace, plenty of skills on the ball as well. And so definitely an exciting player, an exciting young player that could be a future asset down the line as well if we wanted to sell in a couple of years.
What's your take on him, Jamie?
I'm a massive football manager nerd, so I'll start with that. So that's someone that I've, on many a time signed for my team. Not saying I had that first, by the way. So if he does sign, that was me. But no, seriously, I think, you mentioned the tight spaces, you mentioned good in transition. These are 2 really key things that Nuno will want from his players this season, because if we're going to play in that kind of back 5, you're going to want to transition quickly. There is going to be a lot of tight spaces when they're putting the pressure on you. So obviously having someone like Ramon Sosa there that can operate in those areas and then move forward and start an attack and have someone with, like Gibbs White behind him perhaps to work with in the transition is really important. So I think that he's got the qualities of a player that Forest need under Nuno. He's young, he's 24, he's got a lot of time left in the game. 15 million euros, is not an incredible amount of money for a Premier League club like us to be spending on a player with the quality of him. Obviously, there is a difference in physicality, there is a difference in stepping up, but Murillo did it, Danilo did it. Obviously Scarpa is that example that perhaps he didn't, but I still think even he didn't really get as many chances as he should have. But for the sake of it, he didn't really make that step up. But, and that is the kind of reality of it. So I like South American recruitment. We've got a very good scouting, department or scouting people out there in South America. It's somewhere we focus a lot of our time, and for the money, for the kind of quality, as I say, for the age, and for the fact that I don't think he'll probably start every week, I would say that it is a good transfer. I think that it does provide depth in an area where I would say we are actually at our weakest with the wingers. Because, if Anthony Elanga or Callum Hudson-Odoi got injured in those last few games last season, the outcome could have been very, very different. So would I like to see him at Forest? Absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to say too, Greg, real quick, we've talked about profiling as it relates to the center backs, but it certainly seems like we're profiling. I mean, you want a winger to have pace. You want them to have the ability to cut inside, right, and score and so forth. But if you look at him compared to Riquelme doesn't have nearly as many starts as this guy does, as much experience as this guy does, even only at 24 years old. But there seems to be a profile that's sort of manifesting itself in terms of what we're looking for, especially as it relates to the counterattack, because I believe we were one of the best counterattacking sides, right, certainly in the Premier League. So that's exciting to see that continuation, as you mentioned, in terms of wanting to be able to be effective in that manner. So yeah, lots of things to be excited about in terms of who we're looking at. And again, it's very intentional. There's a clear and present vision for what we're trying to accomplish and how we're building this team, which is great.
The age profile is something that stands out. Luka Sucic is another one that's been linked. He's currently entering the final year of his contract at RB Salzburg. He scored 12 goals in 82 appearances. He's a Croatia international. He plays as a central midfielder or as an attacking midfielder. He's 21 years of age. So I don't know too much about him either, other than what we picked up from social media. But midfield, as in the central areas of midfield, be it a 6 or an 8, that feels to me like an area where we still will strengthen. And I mentioned that I felt like another midfielder might be something we would look at to add to our ranks. And of course, if a superb bid did come in for something like Danilo and the club did look at it, then they certainly would need to strengthen in that area as well. We are short of time, so I'm going to just whiz through and move on to our next section, because I don't want us to be going too far past the hour today. So I wanted that to move away from the transfers just for a moment. And Jamie, we asked you to put together your personal all-time Forest 11. There's Martin's Reds on the screen. So briefly take us through your team and pick out a couple of those players and why they've made your first 11.
First of all, can I just say there was like no tactical or kind of anything in terms of will this team win a game? Because you kind of mentioned it, made a joke about it, that it'd probably win 9-8 or something. It would score a lot of goals. I think we concede a few as well. But for me, Brice Samba, probably one of the better goalkeepers that since I've been watching Forest. I was considering Doris de Vries as well, because I think that he was someone that at the time was just a complete revelation given the team that we had. Matty Cash was someone that was, coming through the academy and that had looked really. He'd had a couple of tough seasons and then really broke through and kind of learned his craft, and was just shining really. A lot of these players just shone in a team that didn't really have much going for it, and that's what I like about it. Dawson, obviously a legend, and I'm now privileged enough to call him a friend. He's someone that I've worked with, and a great defender as well. Second stint didn't necessarily work out as well as he would have wanted it to, but great to have him. Murillo, it's just Murillo, because I think that ceiling is so high, and I think he's going to be one of the most special products that you will have seen come out of the kind of the recruitment that Forest have made in the last few years. Colback, because he's just someone that got on with it and did what he was told and was so important in that goal against West Brom. I will never ever forget.
Interesting. Not a left back, but in your team as a left back, which is absolutely fine. But I think that season that he played in the in the promotion season, the bulk of his games at left back, it was as if he was tailor-made for it. So I can see why you picked him.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was tough, because I was thinking possibly Ben Osborne, and possibly someone like that. But Colback for me in that one season was really special. And we used to walk to the games, we used to have to go to the press box, and he would walk by. And I spoke to him after he scored that West Brom goal, and it was, just standing there having a bit of a chat with him and having a laugh was an amazing experience. So a really nice guy as well. Chris Cohen, another one who's just a legend of my childhood, a captain, and obviously so important when he scored that goal that kind of kept us in the fold. So he was really important. I've worked with him as well, and speaking to him, he's got so many stories, and he's just a really down-to-earth guy. So yeah, he's brilliant. Andy Reid, another one, just excellent. Growing up, whether it be the free kicks or the long shots, he had a bit of everything in his locker, really. This one was really tough for me, because I did want to put Lewis McGugan in this front three, or whatever you want to call it, but I didn't in the end, unfortunately. So Antonio, just a complete revelation when he signed. Just couldn't believe we had a player quite as good as him. It was just ridiculous.
He was incredible. He was
just
incredible. That
phenomenal.
Season.
Yeah. I just couldn't believe that Forest had a player like him. Assombalonga, again, unfortunate with injuries later in his career, but when he was fit for us, he was just so special. I was gutted when he left, and he was a staple in mine and my little brother's time watching Forest together. Gibbs White, of course, goes without saying. I think he's probably the best signing we made. I'd say probably. He is the best signing we've made since going to the Premier League. Worth every penny, and we wouldn't be in the Premier League without him. So he had to go in my old time. From my generation, 11. So no one come at me saying about any former players before that, because I have no clue.
No, I mean, I think we've said to everybody that's picking their team, it's their personal team that's meant something to them and your personal experience. And that's really important. The players that you've interacted with, like Colback, you've been lucky enough to kind of have that relationship with Michael Dawson now. And so it's a great team. It stands up. I mean, Chris Cohen's got a lot of work to do in that midfield to hold people off if he's playing as your six. But very attacking and hard to argue with. You've got some great players there from going back a few years and some of the sort of more current crops. So absolutely fantastic. I need to move us on sharply, though. Thank you very much for putting that together for us, Jamie. We wanted to quickly have a word from our sponsors. If you're watching, you'll see the cheese. If you're listening, you'll hear the music. So the cheese trader in York, Stu Freestone, Forest fan, big friend of Talking Reds. He is the business owner, proprietor of the cheese trader in York. If you're in the area, pop in and say hi to Stu. You can quote Talking Reds to him and you'll get 10% off your order every single time. And that is also available when you're ordering via email, phone or Instagram. The card is on the screen. And so please do think about the cheese trader if you want to try some specialty cheeses. He also does your weddings and bar mitzvahs as well. So if you want something extra special for your function, check out the cheese trader. Stu Freestone, Forest fan. Please try and support him if you can. Okay, then. So let's move ourselves forward slightly. And I wanted to have a quick word about the women's team. They won their first pre-season match away at Watford. It was a 3-2 victory. They have also made a very big signing in the form of Kate Longhurst. Now, she's a player with tremendous pedigree in the women's game. She won the Women's FA Cup with Chelsea in 2012 before switching to Liverpool. And in 2013, she went on to win back-to-back Women's Super League titles. More recently, she's been playing in the Championship. She was at West Ham. And then we signed her from Charlton. She's now 35 years of age. But that kind of experience is going to be invaluable as Carly Davis and the women's team target promotion. Carly Davis said that we are thrilled to have a player of Kate's caliber and experience at the club, to have a player in our ranks who has 2 Women's Super League winners' medals and is also a 2-time FA Cup runner-up and currently sits amongst the top all-time appearance makers in WS history. They're over the moon to have her here. Kate's game understanding, combative playing style and competitive nature will serve us well through this season, and it certainly supports the ambition of the club. Kate Longhurst is thrilled to join. She says it's really exciting being at the start of an adventure when the team is turning professional with plans that the club have in place. To be one of the first players to join since the news, with the players already here, I'm excited to get started. Another new signing in the form of Naomi Bedeau from Newcastle. Newcastle have just been promoted. In fact, they won the title that Forest women play in last season. She's defended this joint on a 1-year deal. She impressed in those games against Forest, and she's now come back down into the Forest women's division to help them secure promotion as well. Jamie, how do you feel about Forest women? It's women's football can be a bit of a delicate subject. I mean, there's it's growing. We on Talking Reds think it's a fantastic thing for the Nottingham Forest women's football team to be given the exposure and to turn professional. But it wasn't always the case. Women's football has never really had the place that it's got now in the media, nowhere near in the spotlight. What's your view on the women's team and its place at Nottingham Forest?
I mean, it should be celebrated. It should be welcomed because, football is a game for everyone. And that is the most important thing about it because, and it's important to note that it isn't just women that watch women's football. There's a lot of men that go as well. A lot of the kids will go just as they do to the men's games. And it's really important to kind of have multiple different outlets for the sport, especially for the women's sport, because it is an underrepresented part of the sport, I think, and the modern world is moving now more towards supporting women's football, which it should have done anyway, and putting a lot of investment into it. So I think the comments from the chairman, the comments from the owner about women's football are really spot on, because we should support it, not because it's something that should have been supported years ago. It's just because something that should never have, it shouldn't have even had to be a question, whether you put money into women's football or have a women's team or invest in women's football or, have them on pro contracts where they're earning a fair amount of money, because I think it's Reading or QPR, one of those two, or it might be Blackburn actually, where the female professional footballers have been treated appallingly. So I'm glad that as a football club, albeit we're not the first to do it, that we are taking the stance of actually, doing something about women's football and investing in not just the first team, but also the grassroots, because that's where it all starts. I think that's what people have to remember, that all the footballers that we've been talking about today and we spoke about before and you'll talk about in the future, all started at grassroots. And to give those young girls an ambition as to what they can achieve, rather than it just being a hobby, because, in reality, a lot of women's football was largely unpaid or not paid to the same or near an extent of the men. This will give young women an ambition and something to look forward to, and to actually give them a stepping stone into professional football where they can make a living off this and they can really showcase their talent, which they didn't have the opportunity to do before. So I feel proud as someone that supports Forest that is happening at our club. I've not really watched many of the women's football matches, so it's something new that I can go and invest in and I can go and enjoy. So I'm looking forward to going and watching games in the future, definitely. And it's a really positive step for the future for our club and indeed, I think, local women's football as a whole.
Games at the City Ground for the women's team this season, that hopefully will see an increase in people coming along and that haven't seen the matches before. An uplift in attendance is always going to help. Young women, young girls have idols now. We've mentioned it before. It's important that those female role models have a place for those young children, young boys as well as men. So we absolutely support and applaud everything you've just said. Okay, now it's time for this.
The lightning round!
Yeah, Jamie, it's your turn to play the lightning round. So I'm not sure if you're a Friends fan. You're a very young man, so potentially you've seen it, but it's obviously a classic and certainly a staple in our lives, right, Greg? So that's where this comes from. So a few questions we're going to run through and just answer them as quickly as possible. So first question, what was your first Forest match live?
God, I don't remember the year, but it was Forest v Bolton at home. And I was sitting in, B block maybe. Forest v Bolton.
Fantastic. What about favorite Forest player of all time?
Oh, God, you've really put me on the spot. Because I mentioned him before, I'm going to go Chris Cohen.
Brilliant choice, I think. All right. What player in Forest history would you like to see on the current squad?
Just because he gets mentioned a lot, and obviously rightfully so as well. John Robertson. I think I'd love to have seen him in his prime playing for Forest now. So, John Robertson.
Interesting choice. I like that. Your favorite away or third kit?
Ooh, this is tough. God. Third kit. Well, was it the away kit or the third kit? I think it was the promotion season. The one that looks like the motorway workers. You know, the one I'm on about, the green.
Oh, the high bits, the orange and yellow. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
That was a lucky shirt for us, wasn't it, that season?
Very.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think Greg was just wearing that a couple of weeks ago, right, Greg?
Yeah, I had it on. Yeah.
All right. What is your favorite Forest moment or memory? I think I know the answer to this one, but
You're going to think it's Wembley, aren't you? But it's
I
not. Even though Wembley is probably
Wow.
the better one, but semi-finals against Sheffield United penalties, because at that
Oh,
moment
nice.
I knew that's the moment.
Excellent. If you weren't a Forest fan, what club would you support?
It wouldn't be an English team. I'm quite an avid enjoyer of PSV. So I think I'd probably go to Eindhoven and support PSV.
Wow, excellent.
I
That was
love
a very different answer than what we've gotten before, and that's great.
Mm.
Apart from Cloughy or Cooper, who was your favorite Forest manager?
I like Dougie Freedman. I know it didn't really work out too much for him, but
He had a tough job. He had a tough job.
I think I'll go, just because of who he is and the way he conducted himself. I'll go Dougie Freedman.
Fair enough.
If Forest could sign one player from a non-top 6 side, who would it be?
Brian Mbeumo from Brentford. I love Brian Mbeumo. I think he's just amazing. I hate when we play against him because he's so good, but I just love him at Forest.
Yeah, super underrated. I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Who would you rather sell first, Murillo or Morgan Gibbs-White?
Murillo, without a doubt. You can replace, no offense to obviously Murillo, he's a top talent, but you can replace Murillo and what he offers to this team. But what Morgan Gibbs-White offers to this team, you can't replace at this point in time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Greg knows how much I love Morgan Gibbs-White. Final question. Forest win the Premier League, but are then relegated into the Championship for the next 25 years. Would you take that?
No, I can't bear to see that again. So, no, I'll wait a bit longer.
Excellent. Well, thank you, sir, for playing Lightning Round. We appreciate it. And I think that was the fastest one yet, Greg.
I am so good at lightning rounds.
Well, it is the
done,
lightning
Jamie.
round. It is supposed to be lightning.
That's
I mean,
true.
Sometimes we end up having 15-minute conversations about each answer, but no, it is the lightning round, and that was super fast. There's some great answers, different answers in there, which is what we like.
Yeah.
That's what we want. Okay, right. So we'll have a quick chat about the men's team and the next season ahead. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but just kind of throwing these questions in there for you. Okay. So I'm thinking, how are we going to line up this season? Is it going to be a back 4, back 3? Or is it going to change on a case-by-case basis? The midfield seems quite loaded. So who would be your preferred combination? Elliot Anderson, is he a backup to Morgan Gibbs-White? As I think Richard kind of feels he's more of a backup. Or are we likely to see him start in the 8 and actually play with Morgan? And thinking about striker options coming up. So we'll leave the striker question for the moment. So just throwing it your way, Jamie. Thinking about back 4 and back 3. Where will that fit in? And do we need to sign another defender, a centre back? I think we definitely do. Thinking about the midfield and the combination. Thinking about where Elliot Anderson might slip in. And also another thing that I wanted to ask as well was something Ian threw in earlier, and this is where you can give us your goalkeeping knowledge. Who is going to be the number 1 goalkeeper? So we'll start with that. Go ahead, Jamie.
Well, the number 1 goalkeeper for me still has to be Sels, because he, in my opinion, hasn't done anything to warrant being dropped. He was great for us last year, and I know that the vision of the club is Carlos Miguel. That's 100% the vision of the club now, to have him as the first goalkeeper. But for me, Matt Sels should start the season. But then again, that depends on what Nuno sees, so I wouldn't want to, second guess what he's saying. So yeah, Sels for me should start, but Carlos Miguel is obviously going to work his way into that first team. For the defence, it's tough. I do think we need another defender. Jakob Bijol, of course, is someone that I would love at Forest. I think he's just a brilliant defender. There's one other defender I really like, but I could never see us getting. I like Ethan Pinnock from Brentford. I quite like him, but I couldn't see it happening. But that's
what about Chalobah now that he's been left out of the Chelsea tour? And obviously I know he was linked before. Trevor Chalobah, if interest was reignited there, Jamie. I mean, I couldn't give a hoot if he's turned us down the pass or not. That doesn't come into it for me. I know that he turned us down. We don't want him here. Come on, grow up. Whoever says that, grow up. I'm going to say it. If he now decides that actually maybe I will come to Forest, then we should be embracing that. But would he be a player that you'd be interested in?
I mean, yeah, he's got the quality. I'm surprised that Chelsea are selling him. In all honesty, I think there's a couple of defenders that they've got that aren't on the level.
I think money.
Yeah, I mean, they've got got about 20 defenders that they don't really need, and they say they need Murillo, which they don't, and it would be an awful move for him to go to Chelsea because they just won't give him that platform to develop, I don't think. But for me, I think that Chalobah's definitely a good player that I would like to sign. Fabrizio Romano says 30 to 35 million pounds, which immediately puts me off because no way would I even consider putting him in the record-breaking transfer area for us or near that area, because great player again, as I say, and he did reject us, and for me, I did hold that a bit personally, which I shouldn't at the time, and I certainly don't now, because it's at the end of the day, I understand the situation between Chelsea and Forest, and he thought he could work his way into the team. But if the price was lower, I'd definitely look at having him, because we do need another centre back, and ideally someone with that Premier League experience with also youth on his side. So, yeah, I'd really like him. But for me, I would go all out to sign Jacobijo. If Udinese want 18 million euros, for me, you should go out all out and try and sign him, because he's not only someone that will just be fantastic in your defence, but he's someone that will lead it for years to come. And having the thing is, what people need to understand is they will say, we've got Milenkovic now, we don't need another defender. But a football team isn't just a set 11 with a couple of additional guys. You need competition in the team, because no one gets better if they've not got competition. You don't get better by standing still. You need someone pushing you. So we've got Milenkovic, fantastic. Someone needs to push him. We've got Bolly, who's fantastic. He's getting older, but
he won't play the games we need him to play.
He won't, but he's still there.
No, Bolly's fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I'm agreeing with you. I think Bolly's, having him for another year is amazing. But if we expect to get him in this week in, week out in the team, then think again. And he's going to have his minutes managed. And Milenkovic coming in is amazing. BL, as you say, is huge. Jake O'Brien's there as well. Trevor Chalobah. I mean, Callum Hudson-Odoi might play a part in that. Hudson-Odoi is having a great time at Forest, and they know each other from Chelsea. So you never know what kind of conversations now might be having there. And obviously Murillo did the same with Carlos Miguel. But I think we have to sign another centre back. I think even if we don't sell another centre back, even if we don't sell Murillo, we have to sign another centre back, especially if we're going to play 3 at the back. So 3 at the back, 4 at the back. Where do you see that going, Jamie?
I do see it going 3 at the back, I think, with the wing backs at either side, because I do think that Nuno will look backwards to go forwards, if you know what I mean, in terms of looking back to how he played at Wolves. At Al Ittihad, that's what he played the back for, and it really did well for him at Al Ittihad. It was like a 70% win percentage or something like that.
He played the back forward,
and he played more of a back 4 in like a 4-4-2 or a 4-2-3-1. The noticeable difference is that midfield. He had Fabinho and Kante as his 2 midfielders that were kind of leading that. And with respect to Forest midfield, they don't quite have that same level of quality there. So, of course, he's going to try something a bit different. But I do think he'll go for the back 3. And, if you do, obviously, when you have a back 3, you need more centre-back options. So,
do you not think that back 3 might be more of a case-by-case basis? Because I noticed we played the back 3 against the top 6 sides at the end of the season, Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal, where I felt we were very competitive in those matches. And I know we probably can't read too much into it, but against Millwall on Tuesday night, first half, we played with the back 4 and we dominated the game. We were very progressive in the midfield. The high press was evident. And everything we spoke about earlier was there, and we just controlled the game. Second half, we switched it to a 3 at the back with wing backs. Now, I know the personnel was different, and that's going to come into play as well. But we were nowhere near as much in control of the game, especially after the first 15 minutes or so when we had a bit more of the ball. But Millwall certainly came into it, and that back 3 dropped lower and lower. Nico didn't have his best game as a wing back. They hit the bar, they scored. Sales pulled off a save. I mean, I know the personnel change was different and it is pre-season, but are we likely to be more progressive in it with a back 4 where we can get our wingers involved? Or if we're going to be playing with a back 3 and we're using wing backs, then what does that mean for the likes of Alanga and Hudson-Odoi? Are they going to have to play more narrow? I mean, if we've got wing backs and we've got wingers, what does that do to the midfield? I can't. My personal opinion is that we're going to see a lot of switching between the 2 formations. I mean, again, it's just a hunch. We don't know, but he's using the back 3 a lot more in pre-season, right? He started the other 2 friendlies. I think played in fact the whole games with back 3s. So he's certainly looking at that option, and that's third centre back is going to be needed more often than not, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say now because we don't know what the approach will be. It'll be interesting to see what he plays against Elche and more in particular Villarreal and Olympiacos.
Right.
Those are the two games where I think Olympiacos specifically will be the one to watch.
To the first team, won't it? Probably, you'd imagine.
It will be the first team, yeah. And I'm glad that I'm going to be able to go out there and hopefully see a first team play.
Well, you dropped that one in there quite nicely.
I know, yeah. See, I've got to, yeah. I think when the opportunity came up and I saw the price of flights, I went, that, you know.
So are you going as a fan, or are you going to be doing a little bit of work out there?
Going to be going as a fan.
Amazing.
It's third pre-season doing it, so it's like a tradition now. But I want to see us put out the first team. I do want Zach Abbott, by the way, just before I go on to talk more about it, to stay within the first team. Yeah, because I think that he's been solid. He's tall. He's got the physical structure, I think, of someone that could play in the Premier League. Although I would like to see him get a loan and develop somewhere higher up, I would also kind of like to see him break through and possibly do a bit of a Yatesy a few years ago and just kind of, albeit in a different position, but I'd like to see him break through and get some minutes. So especially in the cup competitions. But the back three for me, it depends how you approach with it. I think that if we were going to see a back three, I think that it would be either Hudson-Odoi or Elanga. I don't think you'd see both. And I think that you might play a little bit asymmetrically in terms of you would have Hudson-Odoi still out wide, but Gibbs-White would kind of be someone that has a bit of a freer role in a central or wide position. And then you get to use your wing-backs a little bit more there. So when you're attacking, you'll have Hudson-Odoi, Wood up front, Gibbs-White, and then you'll have either one of the wing-backs. So you've always got four up there. But again, it does depend. I mean, the back four for me, I do prefer just because I feel like you are, as you say, more progressive and there is more attacking options. But the back five does serve a purpose. And again, like we said against Man City, a game where we could have actually gone and won in some respects with how well we played. The back five worked really well. But again, it does depend how you approach that, because if you do sit back in a back five, it's the complete opposite of progressive. And we saw it against Luton. We saw it against, various teams throughout our time in the Premier League. You sit back with a back five and it's not a pretty sight to see. So it just depends, as you say, how we go about it. If we press relentlessly, if we're intense, it could work. But I suppose the same could be said about any formation we play. And
Elliot Anderson, he took a real crunch. Not a great tackle from one of the Millwall players. I mean, they had 4 yellow cards in that match. It's disgraceful. It feels like he's going to be okay. Danny Taylor made a comment about that Elliot Anderson seems fine, and the Forest staff feel like he's going to be okay, and that's obviously great news. Just briefly, where's he going to fit in, Jamie, into this side? Is he going to be backing up Morgan Gibbs-White, or is he going to get a start?
Or a bit of both. Maybe a bit of both. I mean, I think that in the midfield, it'd be really interesting to see perhaps Sangare or Danilo anchor at the midfield, and then have Gibbs-White drop a little bit deeper and play alongside Anderson. Because we spoke about that transition, and I think that those two players are really key in a transition for Forest. And we've seen it with Gibbs-White that he obviously plays as the 10, but he's always dropping deeper anyway. So I feel like if you did drop him slightly deeper into a more of an 8 role, that perhaps we could see a better transition, and having someone like Elliot Anderson to help him with that would be really important. So I wouldn't mind having maybe a midfield 2 if it was obviously Gibbs-White as the 10 of Sangare and Anderson, because I think he's a crunching tackler, Anderson, and he's good in that transition, and he worked with Sangare well. But again, this is the beauty of what we've got at the moment. We've got so many options, to the point where I'm just giving you one of the many options that you could have and one of the many duos you could make, because there's probably another 6 or 7 combinations that I'd like to see as well. So with Elliot Anderson, providing he's fit, I would like to see him get a more game time. But Danilo's been great. Dominguez has been great. But Dominguez is someone that I still think there's an outside chance of leaving this summer. I feel like there was a lot of interest from AC Milan at the end of the season, and there's still interest from other clubs now. And I don't think Forest will want to sell him. But if anyone in that midfield was going to leave, like you've got your hunch about Danilo, my hunch is with Dominguez. Yep. And for me, I'd hate to lose Dominguez, because I love Dominguez. He is an underrated talent. He's your man crush. Okay, he's my man crush. I won't go that far for me, but he's an underrated talent for me. He's brilliant.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm conscious of time. I wanted just to quickly say that if you are enjoying what you're watching or listening to, we hope that you will consider liking and subscribing. It really helps us out We are on the journey to try and get ourselves up to 500 subscribers. We've only been going a few months now. We're so grateful for your support. If you're listening and watching, I always say it, you could choose to listen and watch to anything else. But for those that are returning, thank you so much. If you're coming to us for the first time, we hope you enjoy and can like and subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, a review always helps us out. So please, if you've got time to leave us a 5-star review, we'd be very, very grateful. Okay, we're nearly out of time, but we are going to hand over to Richard now, because Richard is going to have take us through some possible striker targets. Over to you, Richard.
Yeah, so put this together, Jamie. Hopefully you'll chime in on this. I'm sure you've got an opinion on this. This is an area where I think we still have a lack of depth, right? I mean, most squads carry 2 strikers. We've obviously got Wood, we've got Taiwo. We know the challenges that come with that. Wood's been fantastic, unexpectedly great last year, in incredible form with only playing 20 games, but he's getting a little bit older, and he's on his last year of his contract. And you've got Taiwo, who we know has health issues. So Greg and I wanted to kind of look at this particular position. So love to hear your thoughts on this. I think we're all familiar with this guy, right? So this is one that I know Greg has called out specifically. So you kind of liken it somewhat to Callum Hudson-Odoi, both because they're Chelsea products, but also because they have a bit of a potential redemptive arc about them, right? So his form when he first hit Roma, he was absolutely great.
Just for those listening, sorry, Richard, it's Tammy Abraham you're talking about.
Excuse me. Sorry. Yeah. Got to remember those who are not watching. Yeah. So Tammy Abraham, he was brilliant at Bristol. He was brilliant at Aston Villa in the they were in the championship, scored a lot of goals for them, which obviously brought him back into the fold with Chelsea. And he's had some caps with England. I think he's 11. So there's a lot to like about him, and he's obviously he can be progressive on the ball. He's got a successful take-ons of only 49%, so it's not excessively high, but he has the potential for that. He's obviously good, and he's decent in the air, right? 76th percentile in the air, 6'3", but he's only 26 years old. He's still relatively in his prime. His form has dipped. He's been injured. He only had 242 minutes last year for Roma. So the question is he potentially there as a striker that can fit into this team, I think, and play well in what we do. But the question is how many minutes will he get? And I guess that's the case for a lot of these guys. So some of these guys seem more reasonable. At least 1 or 2 of them are probably not reasonable in terms of potential for signing them. So
he had a big injury last season as well, though.
Exactly.
He was out for a while.
Exactly. Similar situation to what happened with Callum Hudson-Odoi, right? So it's potential that the possibility is if we were to sign him, could he eventually have a similar arc to what he had. So all right, and the other guy, I know Greg's a huge fan of this guy, and I actually really like him as well. One thing we know about him, when he's in front of goal, he can score, right? He's a good finisher. Elijah Adebayo. Yes, thank you very much. I will make sure I don't forget to name them off. Elijah Adebayo. So again, 6'3", 26-year-old, similar in terms of Tammy Abraham, in terms of his physical profile. 88th percentile in terms of goals, 99th percentile in terms of goals per shot, right? And 99th percentile in terms of goals per shot on target. So when he gets the ball and he's in front of goal, he's scoring, right? 50% in aerial duels won, which is excellent. 77th percentile. So you have a lot to offer there in terms of his propensity to get goals in the air. The challenge he has, he's not a great passer, right? But he is positionally versatile. I think, Greg, you've talked about him potentially playing a wing. He can play in a true striker position, a true number 9. So there's a lot to like about him. One thing that I did notice too, when looking at him, another drawback is he tends to get a number of offsides. So something to be cognizant of, because we know that's been a problem with Anthony Elanga. The next guy is Max Bayer. And so Max Bayer obviously broke into the German team. He did log some time with the German team in the Euros this year. 21 years old, very young. Not excessively tall. He's 6 feet tall, but his comp is Jared Bowen, which makes a lot of sense because when you watch the highlights, there's a very similar profile there. He could score, right? He's certainly got the capability to score goals. He scored 16, I believe, in this last season in the Bundesliga, and I believe it's for Hanover, if I remember correctly. And then he's not great at passing the ball in tight windows, right? So he struggles there. Not great with the ball at his feet and taking on opposing players. Not great in terms of his aerial duels won. So there's some drawbacks there in terms of what he does, but he can score, and he's clearly got some youth to him. So there's a potential that he can ascend, and some of these metrics will start to change as he continues to develop. So that's Max Bayer. Then we've got this guy I absolutely love, but this is totally unrealistic because he was being looked at by Manchester United. It's clear he has a goal. If he's going to shift to the Premier League, it's probably not going to be with a Nottingham Forest, right? It's going to be with a bigger club like a Manchester United or an Arsenal, because I think Arsenal was looking at him this season to potential replace Nketiah. So what this guy does is incredible. Brian Bobby, yes. So Brian Bobby is played for the Dutch national team during the Euros as well. Brian Bobby just comprehensively, very similar physically to a guy you just talked about in your best starting 11, Michail Antonio, right? He's got a good build to him, right? He doesn't get bullied off the ball very often. He's pretty versatile in terms of his ability to turn quickly and score from that turn. So there's a lot to like about him. Plus, he's a progressive passer, and he's really good in the air for a guy who's 5'11", right? So he was in the 98th percentile in aerial duels won for a guy who's 5'11". So that shows explosiveness, some athleticism, right? Similar to Taiwo in the sense that Taiwo's 6'1", and he doesn't look. He looks bigger than he is, right? The way he plays, because of how well he positions his body, how well he can hold the ball up. This guy is also very good in tight spaces at through passes and things of that in their final third. Brilliant player, phenomenal on the ball, great passer, can score goals. Scored 18 goals last year for Ajax, so a phenomenal guy to be looking at. Comp is Victor Gyarkis, who you're probably familiar with, and so. He's a little bit out of our league, I think, at this point, but it's someone that I just really love what I see when I watch this guy play. And then the last guy is someone who we're very, very familiar with, right? Kelechi Iheanacho. Okay, so he plays for Leicester, so we're familiar with him. Logged a lot of appearances, right? 196 Premier League appearances, so plenty of experience for a guy who's 27, still relatively in his prime, 6'1". Comp is someone that not everybody was excited about because we were being connected with him during this offseason, which is Che Adams. So he can score some goals. He averages about 8 goals per year. Decent and really good actually in the 99th percentile in terms of short passes. So he's quickly moving the ball around in and around the box. Also does pretty well in passes exceeding 15 to 30 yards. But he's terrible in the air. Not good ratio of goals per shot or goals per shot on target, and he draws offsides. So there's definitely some limitations, which is why I just don't think you're seeing him get a lot of minutes for Leicester. Clearly they got Jamie Vardy as well, so that affects it. But I think in terms of a backup, someone that you bring in as your third striker, not a bad option. Has plenty of appearances as well for Nigeria, so he's got a presence on the Nigerian team and scored 15 goals for them, I think, in about 9 years that he's been playing for them. So a lot of good options, some realistic, some unrealistic, but something that just has been on a focal point for Greg and I in terms of our conversations with others, and definitely a position of need, I think, at this point, certainly from a depth standpoint.
And Iheanacho is in fact a free agent now. He's not attached to Leicester, so he could come in on a free. And there was links there previously. I know that Pep Guardiola has always thought quite highly of him as a striker, so he has got that experience. And as that third striker, Jamie, he could prove to be a viable option. Any of those that Richard's spoken about grab your eye, seem more likely than others? What do you think?
I mean, I've always liked Elijah Adebayo. I think he's a really good, from when Luton had come up, I'd always thought that he was a really good striker, and I think that some people turn their nose up at championship recruitment, but we'll be the first to say how great Victor Gyökeres is. We'll be the first to say how great Adam Wharton is, how great Eberechi Eze is, how great Elise was for Crystal Palace. These guys all came from the Championship. Yeah. So if you are turning your nose up at Championship recruitment, just look at the examples that Crystal Palace have set on so many occasions, because there are some really good players. And Elijah Adebayo came up and did really well for Luton. At one point, I wasn't so against the idea of Carlton Morris, but now I kind of think I'd rather Elijah Adebayo, in all fairness.
Yeah,
Robbie's a great striker, but as you say, it's unrealistic, unfortunately. Abraham, I do like him. I think that's a realistic one. And I think that Nuno could get the best out of him. I do like a tall striker because there's a lot to the game. So, it's... Yeah, I think that all the options mentioned were good. I did like Kelechi Iheanacho probably last season. I did like the idea of signing him because I do think he kind of drops a bit deeper and is a bit more creative as a striker. He's not just someone who scores, he also gets assists. So if we're looking for a really creative forward line, I think that if you add Iheanacho in there, it's a good idea. He's on a free, so it's just depending on how Forest want to go about this. Are they looking to make their stalwart, the top striker signing? Is that the person we're going to be spending the most money on this summer and really, you know, pushing the boat out of the water a bit? Or are we going to go for someone like Iheanacho, which is a still quite a safe bet at no cost in terms of transfer fee? It's a tough one. I think they're all really good options, actually, and I wouldn't be opposed to them, to any of them, in all fairness. So, Richard, welcome to the scouting department. I like your work so far.
Thank you, sir.
I think we absolutely are going to need to sign a striker. The sooner the better. Those ones that Richard's taken us through there have all got something to offer, and some are more realistic than others. And it will probably be someone we've not thought of that all of a sudden is on the radar. But I do hope that, you know, the recruitment team at Forest do turn their attention to that striker position, because I really feel like we're going to need it as backup. Okay, that does bring us to the very end. We've really overran where we've really perhaps wanted to go, but the hour has gone super quick and into an hour and 20. So if you're still watching, thank you so much for sticking with us. Richard, any final thoughts before we go?
No, just want to call out one legend in my life. Greg, you're very familiar with this man because he's the one who brought me to the Forest family. That's my granddad. Today is his birthday. He passed away 3 years ago. But bless the man that is Ronald Edward King, who is a great Forest fan, hugely loved the club and that city, and spent his whole life there and dedicated to that city and to that club. 50 years a season ticket holder. So he's been gone for a few years. We miss him a lot, but today's his birthday. So I just wanted to shout out my granddad.
Well, we wish him a happy heavenly birthday. And
that's right.
Yeah, I know how much he's meant to you. And really, he's kind of, without kind of over-egging it, kind of the soul of what we're doing here, because I know that was what brought us together, really. Your kind of drive for Forest from your granddad, and your desire to just to want to connect with other Forest fans and talk about the club, you know. So yeah, we salute him, and I'm grateful for him. Yeah. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a wonderful pleasure to have you with us. Any final thoughts from you before we say goodbye?
No, I just want to thank you both. You've both been great. I want to wish you all the best in your endeavours with this podcast. I'm sure it's going to go strength to strength, as you've already been doing so far, even before the season started doing so well. So keep doing what you're doing. And now I'm just really grateful that you've given me a platform to chat to you both today.
Well, we're very grateful. And hopefully you'll come and join us again at some point in the future. We're going to be keeping an eye on what you're doing. And we're going to be following you on X and wishing you every success, continuing on the hospital radio, bringing Forest matches to patients within those establishments. Really important for a lot of those patients, I imagine. So well done for that. Writing and now working for goalkeeper.com. We salute you. We'll be following you. And we've got you've got our support all the way. To all of you watching and listening, thank you so much for joining us on Talking Reds. This has been the one with Jamie Martin, and we'll see you next time.